To my friend from Georgia.
Well, I want to thank the gentleman from Texas for doing this special order and for giving me an opportunity to come down and not only listen to him but share a little bit. And I think that we could have learned a lesson from Libya in the fact that we gave air support to the rebel groups that were overthrowing Gaddafi, that wanted Gaddafi gone. Was Gaddafi a good man? Nope. But his enemies were the same as our enemies. And he had really turned over his nuclear arms, his chemical weapons. He had stopped with his nuclear enhancement and turned over his chemical weapons. And yet, we saw it fit that we would help the rebels because of humanitarian reasons on what was going on. You know, sometimes different sides get blamed for different things by just saying, oh, we didn't do that, somebody else did that. And you know, it's interesting that after Gaddafi was gone, all of a sudden it becomes a Wild West in Libya. And as a result of that, we had 4 brave Americans lose their life in Benghazi because we were trying to play nice and be friends. Some people don't want to be our friend. In fact, as the gentleman from Texas was talking about, the real ambition of these jihadist groups, these radical Islamic groups, is to really have Sharia law control the world. They want all of us to be under the Sharia law, and that's what their goal is. And in fact, if you look at ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, they want to go back in history and put together this caliphate that would include Israel, Lebanon, Turkey, and others. I mean, that is their goal. And, you know, for people that might get confused, you know, ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, there's a lot of different names that this group is called. I think the ISIL is the best because I think that describes their intent of gaining this area that was once held. So I think we have to really think about this as far as who we are going to train and arm. Do we know who these groups really are? There's a gentleman from Texas read about the article that Patrick Poole had. And you know, we've had fighters that went to Syria. In fact, we just had our first American fighter that was fighting for ISIL. I believe his name was Mr. McCain. Lived in Minneapolis, went back and forth to San Diego, finally ended up in Syria. I think Josh Earnest used in one of the press briefings that these moderate forces had killed Mr. McCain, and that they were fighting both ISIL and Assad. Now, the interesting thing about this moderate opposition group that killed Mr. McCain is that they killed other ISIL fighters too. They beheaded 6 of them. Now, I don't know how moderate that is, but according to American standards, that's not moderate. And so I think we give some close scrutiny to these folks that we're going to arm, that we're going to give them different weapons that we really don't have a list of what those weapons would be yet. We're going to let the military train them. And, you know, we train the Iraqi military, their police, their defense force, for what, 7 years, I guess, or longer. And then at the first sight of combat, they left the American equipment that they had been given and fled. So I don't know what kind of training we're going to give these moderate groups, but I know we haven't got 7 years to stop ISIL. And so I agree with my friend, Mr. Gohmert, that I wish the President had used some different words rather than degrade. Maybe destroy, maybe defeat would have been a great word to use, that we want to defeat them. And, you know, if you read the open source reports, there's 10,000, and then you hear, well, now there's 15,000. Then we've got people in the military or in the government saying, well, there could be up to 30,000. We don't know how many there are. But I promise you, whether it was 30 or 50, we've got the greatest military in the world. And we could control that situation if we just had the fortitude and the guts to do it. But because of the indecisiveness of this president, this thing has festered. If we had gone, I think, into Syria, or rich or at least armed the opposition forces in, we actually knew who they were because they were a small group. There's probably over 100 different opposition forces. And as the gentleman said, they're fighting both Assad and ISIL. Now, to me, it's real confusing over there about who's fighting who. You know, if you look at Hamas and in the Lebanese army teaming up with them and Assad to drive out the rebels that Assad had driven into Lebanon, it's real confusing about who's on whose side. We need to be particularly aware of that and make sure that we have a vetting process, if it's even possible, that we have a vetting process to make sure that these people are worthy of getting the assistance from the American taxpayer. And with that, I'll yield back to
I'd like to ask the gentleman a question, if he has time for one, because I'm struggling a little bit. The Byron York has a good article out. He published last night, 11:46. But he points out that there are some real potential problems. He says 5 things that could go horribly wrong with Obama's action in Iraq. One of them, he mentions the lack of a status of forces agreement. We all know President Bush had been working on a status of forces agreement. He thought he would leave it to the president to accomplish that great task and have instant international credibility for signing a document immediately like that coming into office. But for whatever reason, we hear a lot of different stories, but it blew up. But the president says that, you know, we couldn't leave troops there without a status of forces agreement, because you can't have troops in a country where you don't have, for example, an immunity agreement, so that American soldiers, American contractors that are there to help protect Iraq from harm. Sometimes bombs go off in the wrong place. Sometimes somebody gets killed that wasn't meant to, because it becomes a war zone. And as the president pointed out before, we couldn't leave troops there because we have no immunity agreement. Well, I haven't heard that there's any immunity agreement with Iraq, and yet he announced last night he's already got several hundred American sneakers on the ground over there and going to add 475 more troops, apparently wearing sneakers because they're not boots on the ground. So I'm needing some help here. Why is it safe to send in American troops now without the promise, the agreement of immunity from Iraq, when it was not safe to do so when he took office? I'm struggling here.